This is the PKU Life Podcast with Kevin Alexander. Today is December 3rd, 2018. Well, hello, welcome to the show. This is the first official episode of the PKU Life Podcast. I say first official episode because let's say that you're subscribing to this via Apple Podcasts. If you look in your feed, you may end up seeing another episode. I'm a professional videographer, but I'm new to podcasting. So I kind of was looking through some of my old things that I've written, some articles, and found something I thought, hey, this would be kind of cool to record. So I went ahead and recorded it and kind of used it as a test episode to kind of help me get the logistics of the podcast hosting and everything set up, just to make sure that when I share this particular first official podcast on today, PKU Awareness Day, that I didn't have any problems and that everything seemed smooth. So if you look in your feed, you'll probably will see that there. Hopefully everything's working right. And also, just going to go ahead and say that I've officially announced that my episodes will begin really in January, the rest of the episodes, but I'm probably going to have another surprise for you here in a couple of weeks, just to kind of keep a little bit of extra content going throughout December. So, what is PKU? Now, I'm assuming that most people who are probably following this podcast are aware of PKU. You've probably either lived with it yourself, you have a child who lives with it, maybe you're a researcher or a medical professional in the PKU arena, metabolic doctor, metabolic dietitian, or maybe you're even a newborn screening researcher or newborn screening lab technician. There's, I envision a kind of a wide audience, a potentially wide audience for this podcast. But let's just assume for a second that you don't know what PKU is. Maybe you are a parent who just found out that your child has PKU and you were really worried right now and you don't know what this is all about, and you stumble across this podcast. So PKU, it's short for Phenylketonuria. Okay, what does that mean? For those of us who live with PKU, there is a faulty enzyme in the liver that does not properly metabolize a specific amino acid and protein called phenylalanine. And what that practically means is, over a period of time, if we consume too much protein, we consume too much of that amino acid, then it stays in our system, it doesn't metabolize properly, and it eventually makes its way into the brain, and it crosses what's called the blood-brain barrier, and eventually that over time will it can cause severe problems. Now, most people, when they Google PKU, the first thing they come across is the stories of what used to happen with PKU, which is if it's not treated immediately at birth, then it leads to lifelong institutionalization, developmental disability, and a host of other issues. Basically speaking, were it not for newborn screening, which detects PKU, and were it not for the PKU treatments that are available, that's a low-protein diet, which is the staple of our treatment. Also, metabolic formula. I call it medical drink because it makes it kind of sound like a child's disease if you only call it a formula. But without, in my case, I'm actually on a medication that allows me to consume more protein. It's something kind of relatively new. I've been on it for about 7 years now, and it's changed my life. And I know not everybody responds to that, but there's other treatments that are hopefully going to be developed and, will be developed soon. But all that to say that if it weren't for all of those factors and I was undiagnosed with PKU and I experienced the worst effects of undiagnosed PKU, I would not be speaking to you right now. I would be most likely in an institution, and I would be there for most of my life, if not all of my life. That is what PKU was like before we had the diet developed by Horst Bickel, before we had newborn screening developed by Dr. Robert Guthrie, before Dr. Folling actually discovered PKU in the 1930s. But thankfully, we live in a world where we have all of these advancements that have been made, where someone today who is born with PKU is if you live in a developed country like the United States and most countries in the world, then your PKU is going to be detected at birth through newborn screening. And they're going to immediately put you on treatment for that PKU. And for the most part, yes, we have our challenges we have to live with, and I'm not saying it's easy, but we're lucky that we have the treatment that we do have. So, if you are a new parent, if you're someone who's just learned about PKU, I'm not, here to go in all the, in depth on everything you need to know about PKU. but I can share some resources with you. My background is in journalism. I was a TV news videographer. And, a lot of times I just like to get people access to the information that they need. And so one that immediately comes to mind is the National PKU Alliance. They're kind of the top nonprofit for PKU information and research and funding here in the United States. And their website is www.npkua.org. If you are a new parent, I would highly recommend that you just go there first and foremost and don't necessarily Google it, because you can come across some information that may be, while technically accurate, not exactly written for new parents in mind, let's say, and, what they have to say might just kind of worry you. So I highly recommend NPKUA and their information you can find on their website. So that is just basically a brief overview of what PKU is. But like I said, I'm assuming that if you are listening to this podcast, you're probably someone who lives with PKU. You're probably a parent of a child with PKU, or you might be in some other way connected with the PKU community, medical professional, etc. So today, I just wanted to start this podcast by kind of giving a little bit of insight into what I kind of hope to do with this podcast. I just wanted to get an episode out the door and out there for today, PKU Awareness Day, so we can kind of, create some buzz about it, and hopefully can start kind of building an audience for the podcast. Because what I really envision, today is just going to be me kind of talking, laying some vision out there for the podcast, but really today is all about just explaining what I want to do going forward. And a little bit of backstory about me. Maybe you've followed me on Facebook or some other social media channels. Maybe you've seen some of my videos, but I did want to go ahead and back up and just kind of share a little bit about me and about kind of how I kind of got involved in PKU advocacy and why I'm talking to you right now. But first, one little bit of housekeeping. I just wanted to say that this show is not sponsored by anyone. I am doing this podcast completely myself. I frankly want to keep all the editorial control myself and make sure that I know that there's no outside influences that are trying to necessarily push an agenda or anything like that. So there's a lot of great organizations out there. There's a lot of great companies out there in the PKU community. But, this is my pet project. This is just a kind of, frankly, it's a hobby that I'm doing. I'm doing this because I'm passionate about PKU content and information. Now, so that being said, there won't be any traditional commercial breaks. But what there will be are public service announcements. Just to kind of break up the show, occasionally I will take a break, and I'm going to bring you a public service announcement, PSA, from, the National PKU Alliance or other organizations out there in the PKU community. Just an opportunity for me to let you know a little bit about what's going on in the PKU community. So we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll be right back. Are you familiar with the National PKU Alliance? The NPKUA's mission is to improve the lives of individuals and families with PKU and pursue a cure. In the past 10 years, the National PKU Alliance has invested over $3 million in research to better understand PKU and drive PKU research forward, launched the PKU Patient Registry to advance PKU understanding with 721 participants from 44 states and 10 countries completing over 4,900 surveys, established the Maternal PKU Mentor and emergency maternal PKU programs to assist women with PKU, continues to lead the fight advocating for medical foods coverage on the local and national level to create a positive change for individuals with PKU. Join the NPKUA at npkua.org and help us make a difference for PKU. So, again, my name is Kevin Alexander, and I am from Shreveport, Louisiana. And whatever you know about Louisiana, you probably don't know what Shreveport is all about, because culture here is completely different than South Louisiana. People typically think New Orleans, Baton Rouge. I'm up in Shreveport, which is complete, like the diagonal. If you know anything about Louisiana geography, New Orleans is in the southeast corner of the state. We are in the northwest corner of the state, completely as far as you can go the other direction of Louisiana. That's us. And so, I'm from Shreveport. I've been here all my life, moved away to college briefly, but ended up finishing up college here in Shreveport. But, growing up with PKU, it was different than what life today is like. Today we have social media. We have the ability to connect with so many people across the world. But for me, I didn't know anybody else with PKU until I was 31. Yeah, 31. I can't imagine what it would have been like to grow up knowing other people with PKU and how that would have made it not such a lonely experience. But, for me, that's what it was like. It was pretty lonely. I mean, when you grow up and you're a kid, the worst thing you want to do is stand out and be different. That's the worst thing in middle school and high school. And when you have PKU, you pretty much stand out. Food is such a social experience. We all love going out to eat with our friends. But when you have PKU and the focus is always on you. You're always, if you go out to eat at the restaurant, you're always the one that goes up to the waiter and says, okay, we need to spend a few extra minutes with me. And, I typically kind of always try to downplay it and make jokes about it or whatever. But the truth is, it gets old after a while. It gets old being the one person that everybody's always asking about, what are you eating? What are you eating? What are you doing this? What are you doing that? And, thankfully, as I kind of got a little bit older, I had some great friends who were very understanding, and we joked about it, but it was always something they fortunately understood. Now, growing up also, I mentioned that my career, I was really fortunate when I was in high school that I went to C.E. Byrd High School in Shreveport, Louisiana. Go Yellow Jackets. I was not ever a sports guy. I was actually the guy on the sidelines with the video camera who was filming the football games. My junior year of high school, I started this class that was called K-Bird. And every Friday we had a broadcast journalism, it was a broadcast journalism class every single morning, but every Friday we had our show that got to air throughout the entire school. And I just grew in love and just fell in love with video production. And I thought, hey, I really kind of want to do this. And so went to college and went to college for broadcast journalism. And actually, while I was in college, got my first job at a television station here in Shreveport. Got married young, and so needed to work. Couldn't just go to school, had to work. And so I got a job here at a local TV station, and ended up being in television news as a news videographer for about 7 years or so. It was a hectic experience, let's just say. When you're working in TV news, that is literally your life. Everything is, every single day you're just busy, working long hours, working unpredictable hours. You get in the car in the morning, you go start working on your story, and frankly, you don't know if you're going to end up going home later, that night, or maybe last minute you get sent out of town to East Texas somewhere, maybe in my case, and you're stuck on a story, and maybe you have to stay overnight in the live truck, and it's just very, very unpredictable. And all this time, I'm thinking, I would really like to use my professional skills to help benefit PKU. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. I just didn't have the time. And at the same time, I wasn't doing great on my diet, my PKU diet. I would say that, I wouldn't say that I necessarily ever went off diet completely. It was in the back of my mind of knowing that I needed to, eat low protein and all of that. But you see, I was born in 1980. And growing up in the 1980s, the doctors at the time didn't know as much about PKU then as they do now. And so back then there was an idea, maybe when you're 18 or so, you might be able to actually go off diet. I mean, in my case, I was fortunate that my tolerance was always a little bit higher than other kids with PKU. I didn't realize it at the time, but I know that now in retrospect. And so, as I got older, I experimented and tried foods that I, didn't normally, was not allowed to eat. I tried things like chicken and bacon, and I never put it as, part of my diet, but I tried it enough to know, hey, I really like that. And so just that temptation of knowing I like that made it a lot harder, because when you don't know that something tastes good or that you like something, then it's a lot easier to avoid it. And so at the same time, I, kind of fell out of touch with my clinic, and because I thought, okay, I'm pretty soon I'm kind of be done with this thing. And wasn't really drinking formula. And so started working as an adult. I was working really long hours, in TV news. And my health was suffering. I mean, I was constantly just exhausted, extremely lethargic, depressed. I mean, the whole gamut of stuff that happens with PKU. And my wife has always been extremely supportive and understood that, PKU and how important it was. And she actually said, maybe the reason why you're feeling bad is because your PKU levels are off, and maybe you need to get in touch with the clinic again. And so I said, okay. And so I made contact again with my team at Tulane Medical University. They've been great. I've been making trips to New Orleans my entire life. It's a 5.5-hour drive from Shreveport, but growing up, that was the only place I could go to my clinic. There was no other place nearby. Thankfully, these days they actually have a kind of a road clinic, if you will, in South Louisiana. It's a little bit faster for me to get to, but it's about 3 hours still. Anyway, I got in touch with the clinic again, and they kind of, by that point, diet for life was the new mantra, and they really emphasized me getting back on formula, back really, strict on my diet again. And so I did, and it took me a while, but eventually I kind of got back into the swing of things again. And like I said, even though I wouldn't say I went completely off diet, I could definitely feel a difference when I started really focusing on that diet again. And so all this time, I'm working on... I'm working on in TV news, and I would like to do some sort of PKU video project, but just the timing was never right. And then, I guess this is 2018, so about 10 years ago, I decided to leave the TV news business and got a job in marketing, and I had a lot more time. And so I started thinking, maybe now's the right time. And I was really fortunate that an opportunity presented itself for me to make a video about my life with PKU. We'll be right back. The PKU Patient Registry gives you the power to cure PKU. The PKU Registry is an electronic database designed to collect and store information about the patient experience with PKU. Gathering information about rare diseases is a challenge. It is important for the PKU community to work together in greater numbers to share your experiences about the challenges you face daily. You have the power to help researchers develop better treatments to find a cure, but this change is only possible with your help. Enroll today at pku.imrare.org to make a difference. So one night I set my camera up and turned it on myself, and I made this video called My PKU Life. And it was just me telling my story of living with PKU. And it's kind of like a general advocacy and awareness video. And honestly, I thought maybe a few people might see it. I posted it on YouTube, and I decided to share it, but I didn't really ever think that anything would come of it. I was hoping it would, but I was trying to measure my expectations. I just thought, okay, maybe a few friends and family will see this, right? Well, I wake up on, I think it was Thanksgiving Day in 2011, and I remember that because I got an email from my doctor, Dr. Hans Anderson at Tulane. And he complimented me on the video and said he was sharing this with his colleagues across the country. And I thought, oh, wow, maybe somebody might see this. And then after that point, the numbers just started on YouTube, just started kind of rising. And I sort of, for the next few weeks, I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. Well, to date, the video's got about 70,000 views on YouTube. And more than I ever anticipated that was possible. And it led to some speaking opportunities, and I got invited to speak at a newborn screening symposium in Finland, which was amazing. That was 7 years ago that I made the video. And since then, I've been really active on social media. I am, still try to travel and do speaking engagements when I can, although I freelanced for a while, which made that a lot more possible for me. But today I work for a production company, and I don't have as much time to travel as I used to. But what I am still doing is this awareness campaign, or it's a fundraising campaign with the National PKU Alliance. It's a campaign called Lifting the Limits for PKU. And there's been events all over the country, places like Nashville, Washington, D.C. Originally, and Boston, Denver, Buffalo, New York City. They had a lot of events so far, and I traveled. For each one of those one of those events, we produce a video for that, and that's been taking up a lot of my advocacy efforts these last few years. But I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to be able to kind of get more involved again on my social media channels for PKU. And I'm communicating with people all the time on Facebook, but I feel like it's been a while since I've been able to just really dedicate myself and focus on something besides some of the video projects that I'm doing. And, I thought, hey, there's no podcast about PKU. Why is that? And, so, a few weeks ago, I posed the question to my followers on Facebook and said, hey, would you be interested in a podcast on PKU? And the answer was yes. So I decided to go ahead and create this podcast. Now, what is my vision for the podcast? Why am I doing this? Well, I love stories. I'm a storyteller at heart. I've been in broadcast journalism for almost 20 years, 18 years. It's hard for me to think about it's been that long. I started in TV news literally like 2 weeks before 9/11, September 11th, 2001. And I love telling stories, and of course my primary job at work is telling people stories in video form, obviously, like short documentaries. Even though I'm not working in TV news anymore, I still do a lot of documentary style projects. And but this is a different medium for me. Audio is kind of one part of what I do when I'm working on a video production. But I decided to create this podcast to give myself a different kind of creative outlet and a way to communicate in a way that I don't normally do anymore. And so as far as the format of the show, like I said, I just love telling people stories. And while this one episode is just me kind of laying out, me talking and laying out ideas of what I'm doing for the future. I've been setting up, episodes for like at least the next 3 months. I've already got planned. I mean, I've got ideas for the next year at least. This is going to be an interview-based show, an interview format show. I have been very blessed in the last 7 years to meet people from all over the world affected by PKU. And because I've been able to meet people from all over the world on social media and in many cases in real life, if you will, going to different PKU events, I've been able to meet a lot of people, and I've seen everybody has a story to tell. I'm convinced that everybody has a story to tell. And what I want to do with this podcast is just try to introduce you to some of the people that I've met over the years. Maybe you might be connected with some of these people on social media. Maybe you've never heard of them. But this is kind of like just an opportunity for me to sit down and pretend like we're having coffee with each other and saying, hey, here's somebody I know. Let's just kind of have a conversation. That's the goal. The very first guest will be a lady named Casey Singletary. She has a 13-year-old son now named Will. And they were the first people that I met in the PKU community. I remember sitting in a clinic visit in South Louisiana and struck up a conversation with Casey, and I was like, I have PKU. And she's like, my son has PKU. And in fact, a little bit later on at the time when it was time for me to make my video, My PKU Life, I interviewed Casey and Will for that video. And so she's going to join me in a few weeks. The plan is to release 2 episodes every month. One episode on the first Tuesday of the month and another episode on the third Tuesday of the month. And each interview will be a little bit different. So one interview for the month will be someone that I've met here in the U.S., but the other interview, and I want to be, pay very close attention to this. The other interview for the month is going to be someone that I've met in the international community, because I really, really want this podcast to be relevant to people no matter where you live in the world. Obviously, I take a certain approach to things, or am more familiar with what's going on in the PKU community here in the U.S., but I also try to stay in tune with what's going on in the U.K. and what's going on in Australia, what's going on throughout Europe. I've even made some friends on social media in South America because of a visit that I made to Sao Paulo, Brazil years ago. And so I want to do everything I can to make sure that this podcast is relevant to as many people as possible. I want, hopefully these stories are interesting to you. They're encouraging to you. They're inspiring to you. Maybe they share some information about PKU that you didn't know, what it's like for other people who live with PKU and the experiences they have. So I plan to have as much diversity as I possibly can get. So that's what the PKU Life Podcast is going to be all about. It's going to be an opportunity for me to share stories of people that I've met over the years, disseminate information from various sources I have in the PKU community. But I also want to take a minute and just make this very clear. I want this podcast to be as relevant to as many people as possible. And, I want it to be something, yes, for people who live with PKU. Something for people, parents of those who, of kids with PKU, or people in high school and college and young adults with PKU. But I also want it to be relevant to, the medical professionals that do such a great job taking care of us. I want it to be relevant to even newborn screening researchers and workers in that field. I've met some of those people over the last few years, and that, many of them work in these laboratories. They work in environments where they don't get day-to-day contact with the people that they're helping to save. The people that they're helping to, maybe they're working in the research areas and they're working on treatments for PKU. And maybe they don't always have the opportunity to day to day, spend time with other people with PKU and hear their stories. I want this podcast to be as relevant to all those people as possible. So that's what I'm doing with the podcast, and I hope you join me again. The next official episode is going to be in early January. Again, new episodes coming on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. And if you want to, in the meantime, if you want to reach out to me, if you want to connect with me, if you got ideas for things that you want to hear, you can email me. The email address for the show is pkulifepodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to send me a message. Give me an idea. Maybe you have a story idea. Maybe you have I just want to hear what you want to hear. You can also connect with me on Facebook. I have a page, PKU Life Podcast with Kevin Alexander page, and it's facebook.com/PKU Life Podcast. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and both of those are at PKU Life Podcast. So look forward to having you again next time. Please share this podcast as much as you can. Share it with on social media. Let people know in the PKU community that this is out there. And I will see you next time.